Thank you. The clerk will now read in the letter from Oversight Chair DeBoyer appointing alternate members to the subcommittee.
Letter dated September 12th, 2025. Dear Mr. Clerk, I appoint the following members of the 103rd Legislature to serve as alternate members of the following oversight subcommittees: Weaponization of State Government, Representatives Sarah Leitner and Karen Whitsett. Sincerely, J. DeBoyer, State Representative, District 63.
Thank you. Representative Wolford moves to adopt the minutes from the September 24th meeting. Hearing no objection, the minutes are adopted. Today we continue our investigation into how Michigan's government, specifically the Department of Natural Resources, has exercised its authority over citizens, nonprofits, and small organizations that care for wildlife. This hearing centers around one simple but deeply troubling question. Why does the DNR's first instinct seem to be killing an animal instead of saving it? Over the past year, this committee has received testimony and reviewed records that paint a disturbing picture. We've heard about raids and rehabilitation centers, arbitrary permit deadlines that make compassion illegal, and government officials more eager to confiscate or euthanize than to collaborate or communicate. We've also heard the heartbreaking stories behind those policies, stories like Peanut, the fawn rescued from the Detroit Animal Welfare Group, and Coda, the coyote who has lived peacefully in human care for years. Both of these animals were marked for death, not because they were suffering, not because they posed a threat, but because the DNR was more concerned about permitting and fines. It took public outrage, bipartisan support, and even the governor's intervention to stop Peanut's execution, while Coda is still at risk. That alone tells us that something is very wrong with how this department is operating. And I want to be clear. We respect the hard work of our conservation officers and the DNR staff who strive to serve the people of Michigan every day. But when the agency's policies become so rigid, so unaccountable, that compassion and common sense are replaced by bureaucracy and punishment, that is government weaponization. The subcommittee exists to shine light on exactly that kind of abuse. Today we will hear again from the Detroit Animal Welfare Group's founder, Dr. Kelly Labonte, and her legal counsel, Celeste Dunn, on what they've endured, from sudden inspections to repeated threats to costly legal battles, all for doing what most people would consider simple acts of mercy and kindness. Our duty is to ensure that no agency in this state can use its power to intimidate, retaliate, or destroy the very people trying to do good. We are here for accountability, transparency, and reform, and above all, to remind our government that the humane thing is not the illegal thing. I thank our witnesses for being here today and for their courage in coming forward. Now we're ready for, there she is. Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us on Zoom.
Thank you for having me.
So if you, for the committee, could once again introduce yourself, and you have a presentation prepared, correct?
Celeste has the presentation.
Okay, and she'll be here in
Yes.
approximately 15 minutes, is what I had been told.
Okay.
So why don't we start by, can you give us an overview of, let's say, the past couple weeks? What has gone on with Peanut? What led to her ultimately being able to stay? And just kind of catch up the committee for those out there watching that may have not heard the entire story of what has happened in the past 2 weeks.
Okay. So as you know, we're a nonprofit no-kill animal sanctuary located in Bruce Township, Michigan, and we have a 25-acre farm. And we're regulated by 3 agencies: Michigan Department of Agriculture, USDA, and DNR. And DNR regulates our wildlife rehabilitation. We're a very busy wildlife rehabilitation center. We take in about 1,000 wildlife a year. And we are the largest fawn rehabilitation center in the state. We took in over 103 fawns this year. So basically, they come to us by members of the community or the police or animal control when the mothers are killed, in most cases, and so the fawns are left orphaned. And I will say, out of all the animals that we take in, I believe the public has the most passion for fawns. When they call us in a panic that there's a fawn dying in their yard or the mom's dead on the road and there's 2 fawns laying by it starving, people want help. They don't want to see these animals suffer. And so thankfully, we are licensed to take them in, care for them, rehabilitate them, and release them back to the wild. It's not an easy process. It's a very time-consuming and expensive process, and it takes a huge team to be able to do this. And just one example of that is we have to drive 5 hours every week to get milk for these fawns. 100 gallons of milk we go through of fresh goat's milk, and we have to drive to a farm that's 5 hours away to be able to get this milk every week. So we have to coordinate that and staff and to keep it frozen. And so it's a big undertaking. A lot of them require medical care. They come in with broken legs. They come in very sick with diarrhea or gastrointestinal problems. And so there's a lot of work involved to get these fawns healthy and back to the wild, medical care, and in the process, trying to limit, being around the fawns so they stay wild and that we can return them to the wild. And so that's always the goal. Peanut was a special case that came in this year. She came in May 29th, a very young fawn found in somebody's yard in Oakland County, and she was laying on her side, could not lift her head, could not move her legs, was very weak, was very cold. Her glucose levels were very low, and she was very, very critical. And so once we got her stabilized and corrected all of those things and IV fluid and everything, warmed her, we treated her as a neurologic patient, meaning we're not exactly sure what happened to her. Obviously, wild animals don't come in and give us a medical history like people can do. And so, our veterinarian would go through a list of diagnoses to treat her as a neurologic patient. So either she had a head injury, possibly hit by a car, or it could be a congenital defect, or it could be infectious. And so we treat for all those things. So Peanut very, very slowly recovered. It was a long process. She couldn't even stand for 3 weeks, which is a very, very long time for a fawn. And so it was a long process to get her to where she is today. Eventually, we were praying every day. We came in to the hospital and we're like, come on, Peanut, you can do it. She had such a will to survive this little thing. And she was much smaller than all the other fawns and just so determined to survive that, as long as she could drink, we have 4 months to rehabilitate her. As you know, by law, October 1st, the DNR requires them to be released, whether they're ready or not, or they have to be euthanized in many cases. And so we, fought for her to get where she was today. Eventually she could stand. She was a little unsteady on her feet and took a little time for her to be able to walk. And eventually she made it out to our fawn yard with all the other fawns and, was great out there, had no issues. She has some slight vision issues. She is not blind. A lot of the reports are saying she's blind. She is not at all blind. She can manage very well on her own. However, she was not releasable. She could not survive a predator. And so it would be unfair to release her to the wild. So the DNR laws require that they be transferred to an institution that has ASA accreditation, American Sanctuary accreditation, AZA, American Zoological Association accreditation, or a place with a scientific collector's permit, or be humanely euthanized. Those are the choices. And so we did apply for our American Sanctuary Association several years ago, and we were approved. So we would be able to keep the fawn. However, Casey Reitz interfered in that. The DNR permit specialist contacted them and told them we had criminal charges and not to approve us as a sanctuary. And so we don't have that accreditation at this time, something we worked for many, many years. And we applied for our scientific collector's permit from the DNR about a year and a half ago, and that has not been approved as of this time, even though we meet all criteria for that. So we would have been able to keep the fawn under our own permit. However, we found Howell Nature Center, who has the scientific collector's permit, and were able to take in Peanut. So she could live there in safety and be used as education for the public, and she would have a great life there. So we transferred her at the end of September to Howell Nature Center, and they sent in their permit to amend their permit. They were approved. They had previously been approved for 2 deer, and we're adding a third. It's a very common thing just to send in to amend the permit to add an animal. And so they did that, and they were denied immediately, which was unusual. And so they messaged us and let us know that they were denied, and they were ordered to euthanize the fawn for no reason. The verbal conversation on the phone claimed a September 15th date was missed, and there is no September 15th date for scientific collector's permit or when you can apply to amend your permit or add an animal to a permit. So it made no sense. They knew the fawn came from us, so perhaps it's more retaliation from the DNR of why they wanted to immediately euthanize this fawn. And then that's when we got involved and put an outcry for social media support. And thankfully, I want to thank every single person there, lawmakers, our representatives who spoke up and signed the letter, and especially Representative Regas for writing that. It was tremendous support for Peanut and for CODA, and it actually saved their lives. And we are beyond thankful for you stepping in to help, because even though hundreds of people were calling the governor's office and calling the DNR, we were not getting results. And so without your voices, she would have been euthanized. Even up to Wednesday last week, Casey Reeds was calling Howell Nature Center asking why the fawn wasn't euthanized yet. So there was a big push for that, and we are thankful that on Thursday that was reversed, and Peanut will be able to live her life out in safety at the Howell Nature Center. And she is such a special little fawn. I hope everybody gets a chance to go meet her. But just the sweetest little thing, and too adorable, too precious to kill for no reason. So that's Peanut's story, and she'll be at Howell Nature Center. Although we would have liked to keep her, obviously, at our facility since she was used to us and our staff and our facility. Because of the permit issues, that was not something we could do. So, in regarding the scientific collector's permit that the DNR says that is required to keep the animals, they did not approve my permit because they said in my application, when I listed my credentials, and I went through all of my credentials, my education and my training, and I put on there that I am trained in wildlife capture and immobilization, which is darting animals, darting wildlife. And we have a pharmacy license to have the medications. We have a veterinarian we work with. And so when you have a large facility with animals, you really need to be trained to be able to dart these animals and sedate them if needed, especially if you're having people come to your facility for education and you have an animal that gets out that could possibly hurt people coming to visit for education. You need to be trained and able to sedate an animal properly. USDA requires that we have that. Sanctuary Association requires that we have that, because obviously it's common sense. You need to be able to manage large or dangerous animals to sedate them if needed. And so Casey said because I had that credential, I was not allowed to dart or sedate fawns. And so therefore, they did not approve my permit. Somewhere in MCL, in one of the statutes, it states that you cannot take wild game by propelled weapon. And I said, if I am darting an animal, I'm not taking game. Taking game is defined as hunting or killing an animal. I said, obviously, we're an animal rescue sanctuary. We do not hunt or kill animals. And so that doesn't even apply to us. And Casey said, yes, it applies to you, and you are not allowed to dart deer. And so it makes no sense in the regulations. As a wildlife rehabilitator, you have to keep the deer wild. However, the DNR requires that you keep collars on them for identification so you know what county they came from, because they have to be released back to those counties. So how do you get the collars off those animals if you can't sedate the animals or dart the animals to get the collars off before they're released. You also have to sedate them for transport to where they're going to be released. You can't just take wild or pick in the back of the van. And just like this peanut thing, the DNR had suggested that they were going to they wanted to come pick her up from Howell Nature Center, take her to a third party for evaluation. It's not like going to pick up a dog. These are wild animals. And so they would hurt themselves in transport. They have to be sedated. They have to have a medical person there to monitor them. Their heart rates drop, their breathing drops, they can stop breathing. So there's a lot to that. And then you wouldn't even be able to evaluate the animal because it's sedated. So none of that made sense. But thankfully, Peanut is safe, and laws need to change, and that's one of the biggest things that Celeste will be talking about. But when these wildlife conservation orders were changed, it was from Casey Reetz's secretary at the DNR, called a permit specialist, who has no education or training in wildlife or medical care of wildlife, made proposals to change the wildlife conservation order in 2022. And the DNR and the NRC blindly accepted the changes and approved them to change these state laws that affect life or death of animals. And it's absolutely, I just can't even believe that even happened like that. And that's how our state changes these regulations for wildlife. There should be a committee with professionals on there. There should be veterinarians. There should be wildlife rehabilitators who manage these animals. If you're changing laws regarding wildlife rehabilitation, wildlife rehabilitation experts should be on the committee. The IWRC and the NWRA, who regulate wildlife rehabilitation and who write the minimum standards, they should be involved, and we need to follow their standards and incorporate them into our laws, not have a secretary changing laws for wildlife.
I agree with that. Thank you.
The whole thing was a bad situation, and the goal would be to reverse those and to make them humane and friendly laws that allow wildlife to live in captivity the way they should be,
I would agree
well
with that.
cared for.
And
Which
I do have a
brings us to
question.
CODA.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask what's the status of CODA?
Okay, so CODA came to us
Briefly,
in
because
2018.
Celeste just arrived, so.
Okay. CODA just came to us in 2018. She was left on our porch, which, many times people will leave animals in crates on our grounds. And so when we looked in the cage to see what it was a young coyote. She had a broken leg and she had a collar on. She was wagging her tail and play bowing, so clearly was raised in captivity, was not fearful at all at me. And not like a typical coyote that we would get in, who would be cowering in the corner and afraid. So we knew she was raised in captivity and that she was probably not going to be releasable. And so we contacted places all over the U.S., coyote sanctuaries, to try and find placement for her. And the main place is in Arizona. They're the largest coyote sanctuary. And the person there who places coyotes all over the world said, "You're never going to find a place. The females are way overpopulated." She said, "We have 20 here sitting in 5x5 cages. We can't find placement for." And she said, "You're not going to find it." So we added her to our USDA permit, which we've had since 2017, and never had a lapse in it. So we've had it continuously. And it's a permit that allows us to have animals for exhibit, and a USDA veterinarian comes in and checks them every year. We get inspections, sometimes multiple inspections, and we follow all the requirements. They look at every single animal that we have under our USDA license. And it's a license that gives you a number of animals. So our USDA license allows anywhere from like 30 to 70 animals. We can have up to 70 animals under our current license. And so every year we can change that to how many animals we want on the license. And so when an animal comes in, we just add it on our inventory. And then when the veterinarian comes out for their next inspection, they'll inspect the animal. So, they don't add them every minute that they come in. If you took in 20 animals, they're not going to come out for 20 visits that year, but they'll come out and check them all at once. And so we added CODA on our USDA license. And the since 2018, we've had her, and we've been to court now several times. They tried to revoke first they charged us with having her illegally, and they tried to revoke my permit in 2022. And as you know, Judge Poulter ruled in our favor, saying we're not in violation of that. She was under our USDA permit. She was covered, and that our permit shouldn't be revoked. And so we thought we were done with that. However, there's been no final decision. Once it goes from the attorney law, Judge Poulter, to the DNR, they have to make final decision, and they have not. So those charges are still open for them to bring back. Then they filed again a criminal charge of having the coyote and took us to district court and in Romeo. And Peter Lucido and Judge Andery saw that she was covered under our USDA license and agreed, and they dropped the charges. And now they filed again to revoke the permit with a hearing in this January coming up, and saying we have the coyote illegally, and that they want to revoke our permit and seize all the animals, all the wildlife in our care, which is currently over 60 animals. It's slow, in the summer it would be much more, but we have 60 animals, wildlife currently in our care that would all be euthanized if they revoke the permit in January. Coda's lived with us, like I said, since 2018. She has medical care. She has a veterinarian. She has a beautiful habitat that Mercedes-Benz built for her. She, is familiar with us. She is familiar. This is her home, and she has enrichment, and she is very well cared for and has not caused a problem to anyone. So the fact that they're fighting hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and kill this animal for no reason is just insane.
Wow, thank you very much. I'm going to call Celeste Dunn up to the table, and we can start her presentation. And we're going to be working hard on CODA. An inquiry to the DNR, asking about the policies and asking for clarity. And then also, if we need to send another letter to the governor, I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. And then Celeste, when you're ready, you can go ahead and start your presentation. Good morning.
Good morning, Representative.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I apologize this morning. The traffic with the rain was. I apologize for being late this morning.
That's okay.
Let me update you as to the status of the Department of Natural Resources, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, with the Detroit Animal Welfare Group and Ms. Kelly Labonte. The last time we were here, they were pursuing revocation of Ms. Labonte's rehabilitation permit. That has not changed. The Department of Natural Resources has not modified their position at all. Their revocation proceedings are still ongoing. They've not withdrawn any requests. They've not modified their request for revocation. So just so we're clear, despite I think everyone's best efforts, they continue to charge ahead. What I believe I'm seeing with the department, and I'm going to demonstrate today through some exhibits. Again, I like you not to have to take my word for it, but see what the documentary evidence presents to you, is that I believe we have people within the Wildlife Division that feel they are emboldened, or there's not a check and balance as to what's going on. So with specificity, the permittee specialist is a woman by the name of Ms. Casey Reitz, and she regulates the permittees throughout the state. In her consistent position of what I see, and this goes beyond even the Detroit Animal Welfare Group, but even most recently with Howell Nature Center, just for clarity, I do not represent them, I've not spoken to them, just what I gleaned, is she holds those permit allowances or issuances, or the issuance of a permit, in her pocket. She doesn't look at the legislative basically mandate. You, as the legislature, has said, and it's law, we are going to rehabilitate wildlife. We are going to allow animals to be held for educational purposes. That is what the statutes say and read. Unfortunately, you have one or two people, I believe, in the Department of Natural Resources that doesn't understand that legislative mandate, and they act as a judge, jury, and executioner onto whether or not people are going to be allowed to receive these permits. So what you've got in the Detroit Animal Welfare Group, I think, is pervasive, and if she doesn't issue the permit, she'll tell the people to euthanize the animals. I think that was seen most recently even with a group called the Michigan Duck Rescue, not be in front of this committee, but they said, you're not doing A, B, and C right, if I understood, again, their letter, and kill the animals within 30 days. There's no corrective action plans. There's no let's work with you. There's no, the legislature wants us to issue these. Let's work with you and get these things going. It's only for the protection of animals. You've got good faring groups, nice people willing to expend their dollars, and yet these permits are held at the behest of somebody at the DNR in a very regulated withholding pattern in which they don't have the authority to do that. So with that sort of opening, since nothing's changed, let me just kind of bring you up to speed, and I'll go through these quick. I don't have a lot for you, but I've got some great bullet points I think you'll be very interested in. The first is the Exhibit A. Oops, sorry, let me just get my bearings here. And this is something I don't believe I showed you last time, but I ran across it, and this was very interesting. And this goes right about the time they started charging Miss Labonte. But also, she had spoken out against two coyotes that were strung out. They were hung. And this is a text from Chris Keel to Miss Labonte. And I'm just going to point you to the last part of, on the left, the last big text message in the last line. And this is Mr. Keel telling Miss Labonte about her post, saying, DNR, these animals were illegally poached. And Mr. Keel says to Ms. Labonte, quote, big difference in how it's perceived when you post things about the DNR. Again, going after First Amendment speech. So just as a slight reminder, and also I don't believe I had showed you that text message before. So let me go now to Exhibit B. This is, because I need to see a little better. This is Miss Labonte, and this goes to what I'm telling you on these permits, the issuance of the permit. So last week with the deer named Peanut, again, my understanding, Howell Nature Center asked for that fawn to be added to their scientific collector's permit or educational permit. And it was not granted. It's been reversed now, thankfully, but at the time it was not granted. No extension, no, hey, get us this paperwork. I mean, just kill the animal. That's the mentality.
What was the reason, if I can interject, what was the reason that it was not granted?
I don't know, Representative, because I don't represent that group, and I wasn't privy to it. My understanding was there was no reasoning for it, but I don't know.
Okay.
Okay? So this is 2018, and I don't know if you can see that well. So here it is. Actually, I'm going to pull it up. Kelly, or Miss Labonte, had asked for a wildlife education permit. And she applied for this in 2018. And Kelly can correct me. I believe they're one and the same with the scientific collector's permit, but there may be a distinguishment there, but there may not be. But regardless, in 2018, October 31, 2018, she is applying for that permit. She's also providing Miss Reed some of their wildlife education material from the Detroit Animal Welfare Group. Miss Reed's responds on October 31, 2018, hi, Ms. Labonte. Based on the recent inspection conducted by the MDNR Law Enforcement Division, we are not able to process any additional requests until the results of the investigation are completed. To date, this was all, it'll be, 8 years ago this year? Well, it's 7 years ago now. 7 years ago, Kelly applied for this permit. To date, she has not received the permit. It's never been denied, which would allow us to sue them in a contested case. It's never been granted. 7 years.
7 years? Okay.
7 years.
7 years for a permit?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Representative, when you asked me why was that animal peanut not added to the existing permit of Howell Nature Center, I have no idea. And why does Ms. Labonte not have that permit? I have no idea. Okay, except maybe the obvious, whether it's a power issue for the person issuing the permit, whether it's a personal vendetta, not really sure. Okay, so this is all part of Exhibit B, just some of the information that Kelly was submitting to further support. Okay, Exhibit C. Sorry. Okay. As a wildlife rehabilitator, the law recognizes that Kelly can have certain people underneath her helping her rehabilitate animals. They're considered sub-permittees. Okay, Kelly is the permittee. Sub-permittees will aid the permittee. So the way the process would go is the Detroit Animal Welfare Group or Kelly says, okay, I want so-and-so to help me rehabilitate, and the sub-permittees are then processed and requested. Kelly's sub-permittee requests were not processed, and this is from April 11, 2019, and Ms. Reitz writes to Ms. Labonte, "Hi, Kelly. At this time, things with your permit are on hold due to pending legal issues. Once the case is closed, we can potentially revisit this." Now, the first legal principle that's in violation there is Kelly continues to have her license till today. So until revoked, they've got to process. And Ms. Reitz admits that when deposed or during her trial testimony in front of Judge Poulter, the administrative law judge. And Judge Poulter's opinion criticizes her for this. You have to process these permits. That is your obligation, okay? So she sits on these sub-permittee requests. Then what she does, and she never issues the sub-permittee allowances or permits, she sits on them, and then in 2021, they charge Kelly with not adding to her reports sub-permittee reports. Well, wait a minute. We don't have sub-permittee reports because we have no sub-permittees because you won't process them. She's then charged with that. Another runaround. So again, this sits for years without process, without a denial, without approval. I don't care. Then if at that point you want to take a position, Ms. Reitz, then deny it. Stand by your guns. You deny that permit and you let me sue you. She won't do it. She sits on it. Okay? So then charges her. It's unbelievable. Let's see here. Hold on. That is within that. Okay, let me go to Exhibit D. So this goes to CODA. This is your smoking gun on CODA. May 18th, 2021. Okay? The coyote is under the USDA permit. Again, Kelly has no problems with any other regulatory agencies. USDA, no problems. Michigan Department of Agriculture, no problems. So Kelly's like, okay, you want CODA under a permit under the state of Michigan? Fine. We don't think we need one, but whatever. But here's what Ms. Reitz says to Chris Keel. Maybe the attached will help you. She did apply for the coyote, and I do not intend to issue the permit. I do not intend to issue the permit. Okay? They continue to charge her for holding the coyote, and luckily Judge Anderi agreed and Mr. Lucido withdrew that charge. She's covered by the USDA. But they are still trying to revoke her on that coyote, and they won't issue the permit for it. And what's the reason? She didn't do this to the coyote. She didn't put the collar on the coyote. The coyote came to her in that condition. So what do they want her to do? Euthanize the coyote because the government won't process the permit?
And euthanasia has been ordered, correct, on CODA as well?
That's a good question. I believe it was, although they have stalled that because they've got it now as they're trying to revoke, but they have been pursuing that. So where it stands at this particular moment, I don't know for sure in the administrative law process.
Okay.
Okay. But right, if she doesn't have a permit for it, and they think she has to, that is their default, euthanize the animal.
But CODA's covered under the USDA.
He is, but this is what's going to happen, Representative. I not only have Judge Anderi in Romeo District Court saying that the coyote's allowed, I then now have them trying to revoke new revocation proceedings, including the coyote. Mm-hmm. So let's say somebody agrees with them. They haven't had anybody agree with them yet. It's been going on for 6 years. She's had that animal since 2018, or seven years.
Wow.
Let's say they find, it's almost forum shopping. Let's say they find somebody to agree with them. I got to run to federal court and get an injunction to stop the state from proceeding on what would be perceived as a state court order because I got a federal permit. Although no one has agreed with them yet, taxpayer dollars, they will not let it go. They just keep coming and coming and coming after that coyote.
Well, and the people of Michigan don't seem to agree either.
I don't think they do. No. It's just nonsensical.
Right. It's concerning. Everything that you've said thus far has been very concerning and alarming about the behavior of this department. So we will continue to do what we can do.
I appreciate that very much. But there's your coyote. They're not going to issue the permit.
We'll see.
Okay, and then, now this goes to disparate treatment. So we've got the failure to issue the permits, the ordering then of euthanasia if they don't give the permit, the duck rescue in the fawn peanut last week, perfect examples. Now we have Kelly also being charged with holding deer beyond October 1st. So while we are in court fighting that, we asked for a stay from the district or the circuit court judge, Judge Catherine Viviano in circuit court. That's the process, because they didn't issue an extension. They said kill these 3 fawns, release them or kill them. One had a femur break. Kelly's like, I just need a couple more weeks. We had the vet saying, it's almost done. Just need a couple more weeks. Kill them or release them. That was the decision. So we run to circuit court, Catherine Viviano. That's the process. That's how I challenged that decision. I run to Judge Viviano. She doesn't hear the case until roughly March or April of the following year, and at that point, the animals had been released. But during that court case, as they're pursuing Kelly and has charged her in trying to revoke on this issue, they, in January, give fawns to Soulshine Wildlife Center. And this is the Soulshine Wildlife Center post, and it's in the first full-bodied paragraph, the first sentence, and I quote, having 2 fawns admitted in January is incredibly rare and going to cost a great deal of money to feed them for the remainder of their time in rehab. Beautiful. That's how it should work. Kelly's charged for holding beyond October 1, but Soulshine, and these animals were brought to her by the DNR, they're allowed to rehab past the October 1 date. So because the DNR despises Kelly so much, Ms. Labonte, they even modified their wildlife conservation order, and Kelly spoke on this about there was no veterinarians, no deference to the people who are rehabilitating these animals about their care and release times. So they then modified it to prevent any rehabilitation of fawns between October 1 and March 1 of any given year. So we've gone backwards on animal care, and they charge Kelly, but they give other groups animals to rehab. And I don't want to discourage them from doing that. I think ethically and morally it should be done, but they are targeting, and there's disparate treatment here. Oh, and this is just another, Soulshine Wildlife Center, they get their approval for their scientific collector's permit, and Kelly's still sits there pending for 7 years. I applaud Soulshine. It sounds like they do a great job too, but it's just an example that some get it, some don't, and it's just governmental abuse. Oh, and here's just more. Again, we applied for the Educational Scientific Collector's Permit in 2018. That was Exhibit B or C. And here we are, February 20th, 2025. Still, they want more information from her 7 years later to issue this permit. They want to give a statement. Number 2 on this letter is really funny. 7 years later, they say, a statement that you will not use a dart gun to take game. And that's MCL 324.40111C1. If you look up the definition, that's the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act, and the definition of take is in that definition section. And take is to use dogs to hunt, to kill, right? It's a hunting, taking definition. It's not for rehabilitation purposes. So it's just a bunch of nonsense. None of it makes sense. But again, this is 7 years later. They want more information to determine whether to issue the permit or not. It's just a runaround. And look, if they'd given us this in 60 days after the permit was requested, I still think that's a long turnaround time, 30, 45. Okay, no problem. But at this point, it's like, come on, 7 years later, this is now what you want? Still, till today, we still don't have the permit. And they just, on September 2nd, 2025, filed a motion in brief for partial summary disposition on their current, you can see here on the filing type, permit revocation. Again, just September 2nd, 2025, brought by the AG's office. And you can see, I wasn't going to bore you with the whole thing, but you could see through the table of contents, it's 54 pages in length.
Can I get a copy of that?
Yeah, I can.
Sure.
email it
And I
to
just had a quick question. So you were here in the spring,
Correct.
testifying. Has there been any positive progress at all with the DNR since your first committee hearing? Was a charge dropped, or was something?
Yeah, I think what had happened is Mr. Lucido offered to drop 3 of the 4 charges, and Ms. Labonte took a no contest plea to 1 count, which the court then effectively dismissed under 771 the next day.
Okay.
So it's gone. It's a dismissed charge.
Okay, so that's one victory
Yeah.
out of many. I mean, you can come every week if you'd like until we get all this figured out.
I will if you want to hear from me. I can give you some other things too. I'm all through the state on regulatory matters. There's
It's
some
fine. Yeah, I
Other,
just going through this, the whole 7-year thing is just it's unbelievable the level of abuse that the organization has faced under the Department of Natural Resources for trying to rehab wildlife with everything that you've done, everything that you've presented, and all the communication that we've had back and forth. You have been so thorough with applying for the permits or this or that, and to just and then to see other organizations receive those permits, in a timely fashion, and you're still here 7 years later. So we will look into that for sure with the DNR. We will contact the DNR and put an inquiry to the questions that we have after your testimony and your presentation today, because we definitely want some answers.
I agree.
So
Let me this is just a comment. What I think also may be going on is they don't understand that regulated industries are not necessarily always perfect. Nobody operates at 100%. I certainly do not as a lawyer. I unfortunately have made mistakes and it's in the regulatory scheme, there's a reasonableness standard, I think, that should be employed. So when the regulator comes in, or even if I'm called to the Attorney Grievance Commission, right, this is perceived a problem, this is response, and then a corrective action plan. This operates very much like a gotcha game, and any violation, even though they have Judge Poulter's opinion, de minimis. Okay, de minimis. They take that de minimis infraction and say revocation, and yet nobody with any level of reasonableness thinks that anything, whether she's doing it or Michigan Duck Rescue or any of these other groups, amount to a revocation. It's okay. We did. We got better fawn enclosures. We got better feeding systems, whatever it is, to make it as best we can. And that should be the mentality versus no permit, revoke.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And as regarding the duck rescue, we are having a tri-committee on November 12th with appropriations, policy, and this committee. And we received some information yesterday that looks like we do have a remedy in that case.
Oh, great.
But
Okay.
details have to be worked out. But regardless of that, we're still having them come in, because even if something has been resolved, we want to go back and get an understanding of how it got to this point and what corrective actions can we do as legislators to make these changes necessary. What we would like to see from the DNR is, number one, is uniform rules for everyone. I would like to see some flexibility in this release date of October 1. And also we need some transparency and accountability with the DNR. And like I said in my opening statement, there are many, I'm not, disparaging those good conservation officers, because we know that there are so many of them. But when you have, poor leadership at the top, and it sounds like a lot of the officers out in the field are unclear about policy themselves, because there are no uniform standards or rules. And it's unacceptable for this organization to go through all of this, and it's astounding to me that you keep going, that you haven't closed your doors yet. That would have been so much easier than to deal with the DNR. And they're not working for the people. The role of government, the role of these departments, is to work for the people instead of against the people at all times. And are you almost all done with your presentation? Because I do want to make sure that we have a lot of time for questions.
Yeah, no, I think I just had one point, and this was another case that I just read in the paper, that there was a woman in Traverse City rehabbing animals, and she didn't have a permit or something, and they came in and euthanized all of them. That whole also mentality versus efforts to place the animals in other facilities until releasable. I don't understand that mentality. If we're not killing animals for food or for human safety concerns, that is just nonsensical to me. That's So that just defies a principled outcome, in my estimation, if you could add that to your list of trying to remedy that sort of absolute result, and that would be great as well.
Do you know how many rescues wildlife rescues there are in the state of Michigan?
I do not. There's a list on the DNR website
Okay.
of those permitted.
I'm familiar with one that we have in my area.
Okay.
When it was probably 6 years ago, we'd come upon a duck that had been hit by a car, and his mate was standing next to it. So it was probably a quarter of a mile from our home. So we went back and got a fishing net, caught the ducks, put them in our bathtub overnight. This is what we do, and transported them to the rescue in the morning.
Yeah.
So with her egg that she had laid in my bathtub. I know.
Very,
So.
very nice.
Well, I'd like Dr. Labonte still on Zoom here. Can we get you both up so we can open up for questions?
Absolutely. Yep.
Great.
Absolutely.
And Representative Wolford, your question?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you. I do have a couple of questions, but I think it's important that we remember that this is more than just about a fawn, a duck, a coyote. This is about the weaponization of a state agency against its people and against the things that they're supposed to be protecting. It seems that the DNR has a lot of time on their hands and apparently too much money when they have the ability to get involved in all of these. We see that in Peanut. We see it seems like their approach or their desire is to kill things instead of preserve it, which is under their, I guess, their what they're made to do. We saw it in Oversight and them asking to bury a pond that had turtles and fish in it. We see it in Peanut. We see it in all of these animals. So my question to you is, would you say to either one of you, would you say that DNR's policies encourage saving animals?
I would let Kelly answer that, but I would say no, but Kelly, I defer to you.
I would say absolutely not. I can't tell you in the, 2015, so 10 years of rehabilitating wildlife, I can only give negative examples of them wanting to kill animals. I can't even give you one positive example.
So instead of saving life, they seem to want to destroy it. That's interesting.
Absolutely. Especially at our facility, they come in looking for issues. Like I said, they park out in front of my house looking for friendly deer. They send for guns using intimidation and harassment, and it's very inappropriate for a government agency. And, you know, our staff is very full of them. We shouldn't have to live in fear of government agency.
Great, thank you. And as it relates to Peanut, I'll be taking my kids and my grandkids to the Howell Nature Center. That's where we live, not at the Nature Center, but in Howell. And so thank you for that. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, Representative,
That's
could I
awesome.
just
That's awesome.
there is, your question's very interesting, because when the release date on those fawns and the one that had the broken leg that the vet wrote the letter, we just need a couple more weeks to finish the care of that animal, came up. So this would have been roughly in 2020, 2021. We did receive some emails where there was conflict within the DNR. So one of their veterinarians said, can't we do something here? Like, can't we figure something out? And it was a 2-to-1 vote to order her to euthanize those. So there is some internal conflict there, but I could share those with you if you'd like, because it goes to your question, I think. Okay.
So my question
And
is,
if I could just say,
go ahead.
Oh. sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
The October 1st deadline is something that is very, very, very important to many rehabilitators in the state, and it costs the lives of many animals. And unfortunately, we have to euthanize them because of that date. And what's very sad is some come in late. You know, fawns are normally born in April or May. Sometimes they're not born until August or September. If they're born at the end of August or September, we can't release them in October. They're only 4 weeks old. They're not foraging. Their rumens aren't developed yet. And so they can't be released and they need more time. And just because an animal was born late, it shouldn't have to be killed. And the people making the decision on that is somebody sitting in Lansing, you know, behind a desk instead of the veterinarians caring for the animal or the rehabilitator who's the expert who knows the animal. And so those decisions should be made by experienced expert people, not by somebody sitting at a desk who has no information or education on it. And they did call in, as she mentioned, a veterinarian, the wildlife veterinarian, and a DNR deer expert. And the DNR deer expert, Chad Stewart, said he thinks the fawn should be euthanized because if it stays in care, it could be habituated. And so he just recommended euthanasia. He didn't know the date. He doesn't know anything about rehabilitation. He's not been to the rehabilitation center. He said that in his testimony, and he didn't even know when the date was they had to be released by. So he surely is not an expert in rehabilitation. But the DNR veterinarian, wildlife veterinarian, suggested, you know, can't we just let them rehabilitate it? If it is habituated, then we can find placement for it. And they ruled to kill all 3 of those healthy fawns.
Wouldn't it be considered unethical for a rescue to be ordered to euthanize an animal over an arbitrary deadline instead of a compassionate deadline? There's been no veterinary input in this decision to euthanize based on that the missing the October 1 deadline.
It was basically a 2-to-1 internal vote with the DNR veterinarian saying, can't we do something? Let's let it live. We don't know if it's habituated. So it was a 2-to-1 vote internally. And then Ms. Levante Kelly's veterinarian said, look, I just need a couple more weeks. So I had 2 veterinarians, one the treating veterinarian and then the DNR veterinarian agree that, you know, we can do something here. And then the 2 DNR officer, or it was Ms. Chad Stewart and I think Casey Reeds, I'm going from memory, was like, no, just euthanize them. They don't ask to talk to the treating veterinarian, you know, to see what the behavior is. They don't ask to talk to they do no due diligence. They don't ask any questions, and they just said 2-to-1, kill those 3 fawns and then charge her with it.
Where was Detroit Animal Rescue Group ever received notice for the right to appeal before this euthanasia order was issued?
Yeah, that was the one where we did take it to Judge Viviano, and then it went to April for an appellate hearing, but during that point in time, they had been released. So it became rather moot, but in the same period, they're giving then fawns to Soulshine, and then they charge Kelly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Representative Pohotsky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to make sure I heard. You said that the 2-to-1 vote to force euthanasia, the one was the DNR veterinarian, one was Casey Reeds, and who was the third?
Kelly would know better. I don't have those in front of me. I think Kelly mentioned it was Chad Stewart. Kelly, was it Chad Stewart and?
Yeah, it was Chad Stewart, their deer specialist, yes.
And it was Casey as well? Or was there a different third?
The emails that I saw, it was the wildlife veterinarian who supported rehabbing the fawn. It was Chad Stewart who said euthanize the fawn because it could be habituated. And then Casey Reeds, who sent us a letter stating if you can't release the fawns in 2 weeks, kill all 3 of them discreetly.
Thank you for clarifying.
Representative Shriver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for being here again under these unfortunate circumstances. I appreciate you defending Dr. Labonte just as my constituent. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. These are things that are happening all over our state. And what dog is, to me, it is a natural resource, a resource for nature. And so you have a department of natural resources that is not only impeding the progress of a good-hearted person trying to defend our natural resources, to rehabilitate, they're actively opposing, actively it's honestly as bad as it gets. You think about how there's an impediment of getting the permits on the front end, and then on the back end, they're taking away the permits. They're taking away her ability to do what she's called to do. And it's just, it's as bad as it gets. And so I have a few questions, but honestly, I just want to get down to brass tacks. What reforms would you suggest in order to ensure that the Department of Natural Resources is going to uphold really what its value must be as far as preservation, not execution?
My suggestions would be that the inspections be conducted by veterinarians, that they would be forced to issue corrective action plans, that any citations start off with civil infractions, but after a corrective action plan period, and the regulated entity or person has the chance to correct, just a normal regulatory scheme, I guess. But they have to be told to do this because they don't. So I think that would be a great legislative change. Inspection by veterinarians, corrective action plans, reasonable period for corrections. If animals are to be ordered euthanized, that they work with the treating veterinarian. If they want to euthanize an animal, the veterinarian who would know best, not them sitting here in Lansing, but the local veterinarian treating that animal. And then any citations start off with a civil infraction versus, a misdemeanor. And these revocations, they just keep going. They have all the money in the world to pursue, so I think that there has to be some standard on a revocation as well. It has to be after a period of time where there's no corrective plan, they're not working with the department for the best interest of the animal.
Thank you very much. We will not stop. And this is something that I want to just, again, praise our chair for leading on. We are on one accord here in terms of speaking up against what's happening right now, ensuring that we can change policies so these things stop right now. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was a lot of what I had to say as well, is in no question. But I find it interesting because in the legislature, when we're enacting policy, when we're drafting legislation, we seek input from the stakeholders. The rescue rehabilitation centers, you are the stakeholders. Have you ever been contacted in any way by the DNR or state agency before any of these rules were put into place? You said that that's what you were looking for. Has that happened?
The wildlife conservation order, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
The only thing that I can tell you is when rehabbers were retaliating to a lot of things that Casey Reitz was putting in place that wasn't in the wildlife conservation order, that she just interprets on her own and states that rehabilitators have to follow. There was a lot of, rehabilitators were uneasy with that and unhappy with that. And so she sent out a random survey to some rehabilitators. Not all rehabilitators. There's 106 in the state, and she only did half of those rehabilitators. And then the answers that were given were not even what she presented at the NRC meeting to change the proposals. So it was done very unprofessionally, and it was very biased, and unfortunately, the DNR and the NRC did not care, and they passed the changes, which As you said, the October 1st is a death trap for these animals, and that needs to be changed. It needs to be by the people caring for the animals that make the decisions on these animals, not some arbitrary date.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. So the attempt was made to reach the stakeholders. However, the input from the stakeholders was not taken into account before these rules were changed.
It
No.
was half the stakeholders, and right, the input was ignored. You know, that even goes back, because a lot of that change in the WCO was directly targeted at Kelly, because they charged her with soft release or baiting.
I remember.
Remember that? Baiting,
I remember.
Baiting deer, because when you rehabilitate, they've been reliant. So there's a, make sure then they, here's a little, go out, here's a little more, get them out the door.
Was it true that the DNR officer did not understand what the term soft release meant?
Not only did the officer not understand it, Casey Reitz, I got an email from Casey Reitz saying she'd never heard of it. She didn't even know what it was. And when they were changing in the WCO, I've got emails going to Casey Reitz saying, wait a minute, you can't stop the soft release. You can't just, feed them on Monday and open the door on Tuesday and say after they've been there for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And that is even recognized in the IWRC. The national veterinarian that is a constant supporter of Dr. Labante's is like, we recommend soft release in the IWRC. So the wildlife conservation order, to get at Kelly, Dr. Labonte, they've changed the wildlife conservation order, and it diverts now from the international standards on rehabilitative care.
Okay. Representative Plahotsky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that you covered a little bit about statutory change, like new statutes that might be useful. But given that a lot of their communication cites MCLs that it doesn't seem that they're misinterpreting. It seems like they're purposely trying to, interpret them differently, I suppose. But are there clarifications in any of those that, in your opinion, need to be made, or is this really just them? It seems like they're ignoring definitions, but I want to make sure that since we're having a conversation about updating statutes, if there's anything that needs to be clarified, in your opinion, that could be helpful, or if this is just them trying to weaponize statutes that are there and purposely misinterpret definitions.
Your point's excellent, because because of what's gone on, the baiting and feeding statute, and I don't have the citation right now, should not include soft release or people who are permitted to take in the animals for rehabilitative care. They go back and forth on a darting issue with Kelly, and Kelly will tell you, she's not out darting animals to just take animals in, but when you have a wild animal, you may need to sedate them for care, and Kelly can speak better on how that works, but they're all over. You can't dart the animal to take care of it. The city of Warren had called Kelly. They had a deer enclosed in some fence area, and her and the vet were like, we can just dart it and then let it, release it. Or, Kelly can testify better as to exactly how that would go down. DNR showed up and just blew the animal away. Where Oakland Animal Control, they see the animal on I-75, they pick it up, they take it to a facility. If Kelly did that, she would be charged with a misdemeanor crime. So yes, Representative, let's clear up taking, let's clear up baiting, let's clear up that permittees are allowed to dart for rehabilitative care, or, you know what I mean? Because they're using the hunting statutes, right? We don't want to dart to take game. We don't want, right? We want to give that animal a fair chance. It's a sport, or for food, or whatever. They are transposing those into prohibitive activity by regulated industries. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Representative Wolford?
Thank you, Chair. So I have two questions for you, but first, I think it's important that the DNR and its leadership looks back at its mission and vision statement, which is when they came about in 1921, specifically for logging, for the industrialization of the land, and the abuse of hunting and fishing. Obviously, they've gotten off track. So, and I know that this has been asked, but I want to people, I want people to be reminded of the foolishness of this. So my question to both of you is, both Peanut and Coda were clearly non-releasable animals, right? Neither posed a threat for the public. So why would the DNR, and why do you think they continue to prioritize killing them instead of letting them live?
Kelly?
Retaliation and vendetta. Retaliation and vendetta in our case. As you know, from the beginning in 2018, we spoke about how some deer were dying in Clarkston. And there were 100 deer on a property and they were starving, and the DNR was not managing the situation. And so we were getting hundreds of calls because we're the largest deer rehab in the state. We got involved. We met with Brooks Patterson. We met with United States Humane Society of the United States. We had a plan. We formulated a plan. We had deer pellets being donated. We had deer feeders being donated to help these starving deer. And the DNR said, no, we manage the deer in the state. You're not allowed to. And so there was a lot of negative publicity about that situation on the DNR. And ever since then, it's been retaliation. They came out. We subpoenaed for we FOIA'd for information on that property, and the next 3 days later, they came out for a surprise inspection in 2018 and came up with a bunch of ridiculous charges, which then Judge Poulter, as you know, said that our license should not be revoked and supported us. So, you know, it all goes back to that retaliation and First Amendment right. And unfortunately, it's been harassment ever since. And so that's what needs to stop in our government. We need to work together for the best outcomes for these animals and go back to the mission of why we're here and stop the harassment.
So let the people that do their job, like you, do their job and get government and that bureaucracy out of the way. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So in closing, before we close, I would like to give each of you just a few minutes to tell the people of Michigan how we can fix this. Not just this, but the people that have been engaged, the people that were writing letters, the public outcry for saving Peanut, right? And the outcome was wonderful. We're looking for that same outcome for CODA. We're looking for that same outcome for your organization, for the government to get out of the way, issue your permits. We need the government to do their job. And this is not government, how government is supposed to operate in these departments. So if you could tell the people of Michigan and the committee in 3 minutes, what would you like to say?
Kelly, you want to go first?
Okay, go ahead.
No, go. It doesn't matter. You or me.
Oh, okay. So I would say that, you know, when I started this organization in 2011 to help animals in need, I never thought I would be in court half of my life fighting bureaucratic nonsense for people wanting to kill animals for no reason. I got all the permits. I did everything I was supposed to do. And before starting this organization, and we're much needed in the community. We have great community support, and there are no places. There's only 106 rehabilitators in the entire state, and very few that can take animals that we can take because our facility is on 25 acres out in the country. And so we are needed, and animal control depends on us. Police depend on us. They're there all the time bringing us animals. And so if we're not there, there's not a place, and these animals are left to suffer. $401 401k fight are in these court cases over and over and over. It has been for CODA since 2008. If they win to revoking the permit, they come in and kill all these animals in our care. These animals don't deserve to die, and they need the public to step up for them to be their voice. They can't for themselves. And actually, we need acres to help us, to support us, and to bring change to the DNR so this harassment retaliation stops and we have appropriate care for these animals.
Perfect. Thank you.
You know, going from Kelly's, I would say that the power of government is unrealized by a lot of people until they're in the system. And that is what this is a perfect example of. Whether you're interested in animals or not interested in animals, if you are interested in your taxpayer dollars being spent for good means, this must stop, because this is a waste of taxpayer dollars. I cannot imagine the accounting on this, if they're accountable, how much resources has gone into this case for a good-minded person using veterinary care to help wounded and injured animals. So that would be my expression to the public. This must stop. Your taxpayer dollars should be held accountable. The person in charge that's making these decisions, I frankly think he or she should lose their job. I don't know if it's Casey Reitz, I don't know if it's somebody ahead of her, but what's going on here is abhorrible in my opinion. I would also have them call the director of the DNR. I'm not sure that he is fully cognizant. I believe there's somebody new in that position of what is going on here. I think he needs to take a deep dive and get this to stop immediately. Thank you.
Thank you for your courage and for your honesty today. And I'm just grateful that you have the courage to speak out, and I believe that has most likely what led to the situation that you're currently in from the department. But it's so foolish how the department has retaliated, and like you had mentioned too, what gross negligence, wastes of taxpayer dollars. There's so many other things that we could be doing to get value to the residents of Michigan. So it should never take media outcry for the government's or for the governor's intervention to stop our state from killing an injured fawn or harmless coyote. That is not conservation. That's cruelty. This committee's work is just beginning on this issue. We'll keep investigating. We will look at drafting legislation. We will be in touch with both of you as those stakeholders for the legislation to make sure that any policy changes moving forward regarding this matter are done thoroughly and thoughtfully, and by using the experts in the field to inspire that legislation so it works properly and fairly for people like you that are doing the right thing. And we want to protect you. We don't want to fight against you. We need you in the state of Michigan. We need these rehab facilities. And I just think that moving forward, we'll walk alongside of you. So, and for now, we will continue to fight for CODA, and we hope that the public will engage just as they did for Peanut. And I'd like to remind the people of Michigan, it's not just about the fawn or the coyote. It's about government overreach and government abuse. So that's just really all I wanted to say. So I thank you very much. And Representative Wolford moves to excuse any absent members. And with that, there'll be no more business before the committee today. The committee stands adjourned.